Hello, people. Welcome to SketchCraft Live, 3 a.m. It's super late where I am, but it's not super late where our guest Dominic is here to talk about his Bucky O'Hare piece we've gone over before. Dominic, how you doing?
Hey Rob, how's it going?
Pretty good. So, if you haven't followed before, folks, there's a couple art tips in the art tips playlist. We kind of went over the inception of Dominic's piece, and he was kind of asking about lighting, basic silhouetting, lighting. And we kind of went through, I think, 2 iterations already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And then you kicked me back to this latest version and asked for some help. And I said, hey, why don't you come on? So if you have any questions at this point, you can ask, and we can all kind of work together. And so I just want to get out a few things really quick. One, I want people to understand, like, this is a complex piece of art to be practicing lighting solutions
yeah,
to.
a bit ambitious for a first attempt.
I think when people on the internet or even in, I think anywhere, I think when they see a piece of art like this, I think they think, well, it's just a few characters, like there's a reason why when there's maybe, you see, you see a comic book spread with like a dozen people, why they're
Uh,
not super rendered.
Splash page.
Yeah, like splash page. You ever notice they're not super rendered? Or maybe it took 4 people to color that book. Like
Mm.
one person might have worked on that double page, or there's all sorts of reasons, why. Uh, it's probably not their first time they did that too. Like,
Yeah, so yeah, this one's been kicking my ass.
so, but hey, through challenges, right? We all get better. So let's just
Yeah.
take a look at it really quick. All right. So why don't I go ahead and just ask you, what would you like to? You have questions first. Anything specific you want to go over? Or?
Um, it's just to me this is quite muddy, the lighting in it. But I've actually over the weekend I watched your Battletoads ones, and that sort of answered a few of the questions that I had. Sort of given me a few more techniques to go back and reattempt it.
Yeah, if we add a new layer and fill it with black, and we'll set it to, you can sort of see that these characters are super dark back here. They kind of become
Yeah.
one giant mass. If we zoom way out, and that's kind of one of one of the little tricks to painting with sort of I don't want to say aggressive. I want to say with key light sources is you can end up making a lot of things really dark and then
Mm.
certain things really bright. And that's good for contrast. The problem is you can end up in a situation where it almost feels like your art becomes a chiaroscuro. Is that, you know what I'm talking about? Like those velvet paintings. Like,
Yeah.
you ever feel like you're like working on a black canvas and just adding.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, you need to get some light in here, but it's not really happening.
Yeah, so one of
Yeah.
the things we can do is I'm just going to quickly, to mock up, I'm going to make a few duplicates of this. And then I'm just going to go here and blow the shit out of this thing. Like, even to the point where this is way beyond doable. This is kind of like this is like just a way to start. Alright, so I'll put that in there. And then we'll mask that out. And I'm going to see here, I'm going to use I'm going to go to my web only colors. Really good rule of thumb here, folks. If you're just practicing value-based painting in Photoshop or any other photo editing software, which this is not dependent upon Photoshop, you can switch to web only and just kind of go, oh, instant 30% or 40% gray. Hey,
Yeah,
instant
it's kind
70.
of why.
You know what I mean? This reminds me of the Copic markers in a way. You got like a 20, 40, 60, 80,
Right, it's a more
10.
controlled palette.
Yeah, and then you could make a duplicate, but I just like to use this right here. So we can start there. And then if I come in here, I can start to just kind of like airbrush really quickly. Let me kind of a little more surface. Some of these underlights,
Mm.
you know, and that gets you somewhere, especially up in these areas. You can create this kind of concentrated. And I'm only using the 50% so I don't have to, oh, let me make sure that's set to black. So I'm not blowing crap out of my colors. Um, and generally speaking, and Dominic, you're a professional, right? Like this is
Yeah.
generally what an art director does, right? You kind of go, oh, I got this far, and and they kind of problem solve. Like
Yeah.
it's always good to have a person outside. Because like when you're in this, you're kind of mired in the fingers aren't right, and I got to come here and get the
Yeah. Call that tunnel vision.
yeah, tunnel vision, right? So, and this is not really breaking up the characters, but it's at least putting something into there. So let's come and just really quickly tonalize a few things. So got these colors for the background, and I'm just going to quickly swatch them, and then make a quick gradient map. And then in between, this is based off the colors in your background.
Yeah.
All right. Mm, kitty, normal.
Go. Let me put it out.
G, and okay, make a mask out of that. So I can come here and start to take this character that you got in the background. And
Yeah.
because he's in the background, he's going to be more atmospheric. He's going to be more toned to the coloring of the background. Because you got to like
Yeah.
push and pull these characters from one another. That's not a piece of him, right?
Yeah. I kind of tried to do that, especially around sort of you can see it on his arms on the sides and stuff, but it's kind of made it him more darker
You didn't
rather
go
than
further enough.
yeah.
See what I mean? Like you're trying to do this in like I want to say 30% increments in terms of separating characters, and you got to do like
Mm.
a strong. Something's gonna fall to the background.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they can't all be detailed and in focus. Like, like that. I tried to think of it like the difference between Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith, right? Or, or let's say Attack of the Clones, because the video photography in that is atrocious. There's no depth of field like in Attack of the Clones, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Just
almost
everything's in focus.
yeah, it's the real shitty CG version of Citizen Kane, right? Like, where like everything's in focus, but not because it's cool, like because they had no ability to push and
Yeah.
pull those things. So we can come here and look. You can always tone this down if you're not that into it. But I'm just trying to like right now just present basic like
Sure.
solutions. So we can come here and I need to make sure. And the reason why I like to work with like a 30% or 40% at first is it gives you room to go further or lighter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it kind of just if you start with if you're doing all your lighting with just black and white, I mean, where is she gonna go, man? Like more black, like it's like Spinal Tap, right? We'll do an all black out. We'll do blacker than black,
Not
110%.
gonna work.
This volume goes to 11. So so and then what you can do is start to say, okay, now these characters behind Bucky, all they need is some minor atmospherics, and that may not be tied to the blue. That could be more that green yellow, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And this is where just airbrushing, like if you even notice on the Battletoads piece, I don't even use the flash for this. I literally do what I'm doing now. It's just taking the wand tool
Mm.
and kind of just going in here and airbrushing in between characters. The reason for that is one of the things I learned how to do. I learned how to use Photoshop the way I use it now, working on licensed apparel and T-shirts. And when you get Marvel art from comics, this shit's not layered, man. Like you don't get any. Everything's just a flattened TIFF.
Yeah.
So you got to break all those characters up, rebuild all the
Yeah.
elements,
Just
and then
work
get
it yourself.
yeah, get absolutely no credit because you didn't actually draw the thing, but you spent probably a grip of time, dude. So I treat this stuff the same way. So when people go, oh, would it be easier layered? I'm like, it's not gonna matter. Like uh, when you get to this point, what you really want to do is try to do what's best for the art. So if we come over here and grab some of this green and just kind of airbrush to pop them out
Right.
a little
Yeah.
bit, right? Just to pop them out.
Yeah. It separates them from the foreground a bit more.
And a little bit of the yellow, right?
Hmm.
I think his ear, she's right in between there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so now let me just go there. Yeah, sometimes my keyboard isn't right where I think it is. I mean, if you start to pull away, you can see
Yeah. You can
steps,
definitely see the
the
difference.
steps, right? So
Yeah.
darker in the front, sort of neutral and lighter as we hit back is sort of the idea. Now, you still got some contrast in this character. It's not wrong to have. Like, he doesn't have to be, like, if you went here from a neutral standpoint and you're like, oh, I'll just make him so light. It doesn't have to be. Oh shit! I was still selecting. Like if we come here and just lighten the fuck out of them, you know what I mean? That can look a little off. You know,
Yeah.
it's like whoa. Now you're not. So it's not all things are like that. But one of the things you could do is just centrally kind of working that down a little bit, like just a little under. You
Yeah. I
know,
see it. Just picking out little bits.
yeah. And this guy, this dude, this is the obligatory handicap kid or something from the 80s, right? Remember they had to like work in everybody back in the 90s, right? Like we got everyone's part of the team now. He has the power of heart. So
Oh, God.
overlay screen E. Oh shit. Ooh. This is why when people get really focused on like collecting brushes to solve their problems, like brushes won't solve lighting problems, man. You know what I mean?
I don't really have many brushes. I just stick to the basic ones I've got there and just, what it comes with.
Right, but I just sometimes people go, well, what about this? If you use this, they got these brushes and that brushes. I'm like, guys,
Yeah.
when you got a deadline, man, brushes. I mean, yeah, you can create texture with brushes. You can get interesting ideas, but you can't. There's no shortcut. Like at some point, you're gonna have to. I'm not saying that you are. I'm just for the folks out there. Sometimes they get
Yeah.
really, really crazy with the brushes. So let's see. If I had to think about, okay, so now you got this duck dude, right? And what we want to do is make Bucky the focus as much as possible. I'm assuming if you're out in the real world, right? Now this is your own piece of art, so you can make anyone the focus you want. But
Yeah.
if I always sort of treat when it comes to focusing on my art and focal point, I try to pretend it's like a real job in some way. Like I would probably want Bucky, to be like a little bit more focal.
Yeah. The
Um,
hero character.
So we can just come here and we lasso around the duck dude. Let me add a plus here. Let's get a little bit more. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to. You don't have to do all that. Just
Yeah.
and then adding
Little bit Oh,
Yeah. Control D, and then her hair probably. I didn't think I grabbed that. Matter of fact, we can start with her and the robot, and then erase a little bit of it. That's another way too, folks. Like, you can just come in and airbrush some stuff in, not be perfect about it, and then just erase out a part. You don't have to go in there and make every little selection 100% perfect. I like to get it working, and then I can erase around.
yeah.
And then we can hit erase, and just underneath here, we're on the edge, we can start to, and then around here, clean that up a little bit. So you start to get separation between the layers.
Yeah.
Now this sort of falls into I call it the FX part. If you ever watch my painting, like I call it the part, I start to make a bunch of layers called lighting and FX. So F5 color, I'm gonna fill this with black. That's not true. Well, it is true black, but it's not gonna help us. Set this to color dodge, and now you can kind of come in. Let's grab some of this color and add some of the lighting, but in color. And you can figure out how, like, if he's got this gun here, you could,
Right. Yeah.
you know, say, okay,
Yeah.
that's a,
I kind of tried because I did a few iterations of like getting light effects, and sometimes I thought, oh, it's too much, and sometimes oh, it's not enough.
that
Trying to
is going to come
balance.
down to personal preference and time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I constantly am reevaluating pieces that I did. Like, was that really the best way to do that? Like, you know, I think, you know, one of the things you'll be able to do is it's always good like a year from now to kind of go back and just say, how could I have simplified this instead of orange? Like if I look at this and I go, okay, this is kind of orange and yellow, red into green, into blue, into purple. It's almost a rainbow-esque color
Yeah.
scheme, like, and we've all been there. One of the things you can do, moving in toward the future, is just give yourself
Yes. A tighter palette.
yeah, a much tighter palette. Like even with the Battletoads, I mean, it's rainbowy, but it's actually all centered around cool colors. Like, and I say space colors. It's space aquarium. Is that piece? I'm like, it's an aquarium in space. And so like if you
Yeah.
look at even stuff like the Toe Jam and Earl, which uses the exact same color scheme, it's based around blue and purple. And
Yeah.
then things like green and red are accent colors. You know, but they're not, and that's because they have green and red in their logo, and I wanted it to tie. But I don't have a strong orange underlighting competing for that too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I let them be warm. So one of the things you can do moving forward is make it so that the characters are a bit more. I mean, they are warm here in the sense that the ground is warm, but I get the sense that you almost tend to look right here. You know what I mean? Because it is so warm
Yeah.
versus, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so. Yeah, that's a little. Is that can I even do anything about that? Like, I might be able to do something about that. So we could probably recolor gradient maps, my friend. You got a
No, yeah,
bunch.
all the all my initial or secondary lighting is all gradient mapped, so I can go in and change them all.
Nice.
That's
They help, right?
yeah, yeah,
So when we come here and just see what this looks like versus trying to make them cool colors as well, you know? And I'm just gonna go and harshly make these guys tonalized. I'm not just because I want to see. Sometimes it's easier to go too far and
mm,
then pull back than to try to keep doing everything in small incremental steps. Obviously, if you have selection flats, it's way easier.
yeah.
So,
God, that was a tedious weekend.
Yeah, you got to get a brand then, or just pay people. Like it's tough, dude. Like we all had to do our own. It's not that it's like doing the flats is tough so much as once you get done, then you get to spend another 6, 7, 8 hours coloring.
Mm,
It's like you get to do all that shit and be creative, and it doesn't put you in a creative mindset. It's very technical.
yeah. I spent ages worrying about things that I didn't really matter too much in the end, like the the way two blocks of color will meet underneath a line, and it makes all these niggly little bits when when you're using the lines to be colored. And you have all these like artifacts. I went around trying to clean all them up for ages, but
Yeah,
when you zoomed out,
yeah, you can't see it, and then at the very end, you can always clean that up at the very end if you're
yeah,
picky about something. But yeah, I've tried every way around it, like making sure all the color goes 100% underneath the line. It's irrelevant. Like,
mm,
like with the Battletoads, that was an experimentation. I didn't do any of that cleanup. I did nothing.
yeah. I,
I
I noticed that. Because I was watching that. I think like, when's he going to do all the cleanup? Because I spent ages
Yeah.
on doing that and on mine, and it just doesn't matter in the end.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, if something sticks out at the end, like I figured that out on the Chrono Trigger beats. I'm like, if something sticks out, like if you got a big chunk that isn't working, it's got a little bit of a weird effect, then at the end I'll
Yeah,
clean it up. But I'm not gonna sit here and make it all 1,000% perfect because nothing really is. I mean, like, and the art
yeah.
that's
And
super. Go ahead.
unless you're going to look under it in a microscope when it's printed, you're not going to see them. It's only because you can zoom in on the computer that you can see it.
Right. So that right there, I mean, it's a little tonalized, all over, but
Mm,
um, let me see. Yeah, I don't like that. Control G. This is where you get to use layers and masks. So maybe I can take select inverse and just cut out a copy. Shade it. That's not gonna work. I'm more concerned about making sure Bucky isn't orange. So that's kind of a bigger issue. It's tough when you're working with lighting. How much of the light source do you put in? How much of the character's key colors do you leave? Right.
yeah,
I tend
yeah,
to side with trying not to, at this point, over tonalize characters. Um, Try not to make them too dodge and burny. It's tough when you start messing with layer effects, folks. You can get into like that dodge and burn mode where things get really super contrasted. It doesn't look very natural.
yeah.
Um, Let me do that 100%, and then just let's see. That's kind of more of a blue lighting. If I take this, I mean, you're starting. You see what I mean? Like it's not like 100% there, but by any measure.
Yeah,
But you can
yeah, it's
start to
super
see,
progression.
like if we go and create a snapshot window, history snapshot, you can start to actually look back at,
Mm,
what we're trying to do there. Like maybe that might be a little much on that kind of lighting. Maybe instead of a color dodge, uh, linear light.
yeah, I think the toads work better in that kind of when I that color. I sort of tried to have them in darkness, but have a little bit of bounce light coming from space,
Mm.
illuminating them, so they're sort of blue and purple. But seeing that now, I think it works better with them in the orangey reds.
Yeah, so those core colors too, like trying to make sure that all your core colors aren't just white that then go to a color.
Mm,
You know, like when you want things to look more artistic, they should have a colored core. Even if it's like blues, that colored core could be a very faint green or a mint green. If it's pure white, it can look more sterile, which is good for like mechanical objects. Maybe like the laser bulb, maybe not so bad. But if I come here and select, like let's go right up into this area. I set that to darken and just turn that down to like 35. It's gonna or 40%. It's gonna take those whites and kind of just offset them a little bit.
mm.
See?
Yeah, just tinted very slightly.
Yeah, and then you can always come in here and you don't have to have it go over the entire piece. I mean, you can come here and
Yeah, just
take the
tint it.
yeah, and then especially things back there. I mean, that's a little tough because that's more of a yellow. This is what I'm saying. You have an orange to blue. That can make things a little difficult here. Like, let me just think for a second. Sometimes thinking helps. Let me grab some soda. Um, so many different colors or lighting. Because when you think about it, right, you have a light source here. Let me make certain this is visible. So you have like a light. Gee. All right, so we can see because you have a light source here. You have one here.
Yeah,
Small little bits here. Something back here. So what I try to do when I'm setting up a basic roughy is I want one centralized basic. Should I keep it real, man. I don't consider myself to be like a strong digital painter. Like I'm not Frazetta. He wasn't a digital painter, but you know what I mean. I'm not like Ryan Church or any of these guys. So
yeah,
what I'll do is uh, I'll think of all the lighting for me would be coming either from down here, 100%, right, or right here,
right,
or right here. I think in this case, because they're facing, I probably would have made it like the key lighting coming up this way. Because underlighting works, it's more of a, like with the Battletoads it's fine, but it's because there's three of them. Like,
yeah,
they're not tiny little dudes, they take up a giant space so they can look a little bit more aggressive. It's more of an aggressive thing, right? And it can run into a situation where you're cutting off faces somehow, like if that makes any sense. You almost feel like
yeah.
you can't see.
Yeah, I kind of thought that that laser going in would be like the main key light, and then sort of space would be the fill light, and all the little laser beams and things like that would just be little effect lightings like rim lights and stuff. But it kind of escalated.
Hey man, it's funny, a year from now you'll be like, ah, shit was ridiculous, or even like stressing about it. It's not. I remember the first time when I really got myself in trouble on was I did this critters. You seen the critters piece? So I did this
uh,
piece. I'll show you guys. This is where I made a colossal mistake once. So I got Yahoo open here. Let me go to my DeviantArt. And so in 2009, I used to work at this gaming magazine right here in the States called Play. And he wanted the guy who owned it wanted me to do this piece called Critters, which is going to be a tribute to all the mascots in gaming. This right here. And this is the first
Yeah.
time I drew and colored everything. So I added no real lighting source. I just kept all the characters sort of airbrush because it was very difficult for me to get all this done on time.
Yeah.
And then he wanted a follow up with like the human mascots. So I did Critters Part 2, and this shit got fucking stupid, dude.
Holy
This,
God.
yeah, this is ridiculous, man. Like, there's just a wall of nonsense, and I try to add multiple lighting sources and yellow blast and blue blast and lightning bolt and fire, and it's just a wall. I don't even print this one up for cons. I'm like fucking wasting my time. Like, and it's not that it's a wall of characters, although it is a wall of characters. Compositionally, I prefer to keep them straight. When there's this many characters, I did that straight on composition
Yeah.
for a reason. He didn't want the same thing, and then I ran around trying to create all these creating lighting effects, but I should have made like a few characters really big and the other ones kind of fall into the background. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then with
Had
all
the
these
central focus.
yeah, and then with all these characters, like there should have been like normal lighting and then tonal lighting somehow. You know what I mean? Because
Mm.
you just can't see anything. It's a nucking nightmare. So filter, blur, motion. Just turn that down just a little bit. Oh, that's the yeah. It's
So the complexity on this piece, though it's been quite brutal, I think it's put me in good standing for when I do my next single character, my next one.
yeah. I think again, it's not so much that there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven characters. It's that you also have dramatic lighting.
Mm.
You know, and I think the dramatic lighting can make it hard to see details. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Um,
especially like atmospherics and stuff like that. It just sort of whitewashing some of the details.
yeah, so this kind of goes back to the very beginning of the piece. Like if I dig up, like when I first tried to do multiple characters again, when I came back during GameFan, I did this 3DS cover. It was for the launch of the 3DS, so it was based around all the characters around the game, the games that came out for the handheld. And what I did on this piece was I made certain that I had no strong lighting source
Mm.
because I was like, all right, I'm just going to work on rendering the characters. I just want to make sure the details were visible. Now, it's not the most dramatic lighting in the world, but it doesn't get in the way of hiding all the effort. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, they can see
Yeah,
everything, it's in focus. Kind of the way art used to be in the 90s, right? Like you bought a magazine, you could just see all the art. Now everything with digital painting is based around super dramatic lighting sources. I don't know if that's made better art. Like on this one, does it need strong? I could see now where I could make her all in the dark and make it this key thing and backlighter. But I don't know if that makes it better. It just makes it a more moodier piece. It works fine as it is. It's not going to win me an award, but people like it. So
it's easier to read, I
easier to
think.
read. So when I get to something like the Battletoads piece, I've already done how many pieces by the time I got to that? You know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
constructurally is that a fucking word? Us
No.
Americans, we just like to make up English words and shit. Uh, there's actually not, even though they're underlit, they're not in serious darkness. You understand what
No.
I mean? Like it's still, I'm keeping it a lot visible. I'm just trying to push it back just a little bit, you know? And I
Mm.
sort of feel like this has a very similar idea in terms of that.
Yeah.
It's a little unfair there because now something you should remember too. I set mine to Control Y, but if you look at the RGB, your contrast is fine on the RGB version. And I have a feeling if this were to print, even though it looks like this, you're still going to get darker blacks when it prints. So right now I'm going to switch back to RGB because you're contrasted. Let's just skip printing altogether and kind of work on like, if we can use that as a slight reference. You can see like one of the things I try to do is the whites aren't 100% white, right? They're like light cream,
Yeah.
you know? Um, things like that just help keep it from looking like right here in his eyes. If they're pure white like that, I don't know. I don't know about you. Can you see that dodge and burn thing where it's almost like this pure white and black? It doesn't feel natural. It feels more like computer generated. Does that
Yeah.
make
I
sense
know.
to you?
Yeah. It's quite a harsh edge between them two.
Right. But he definitely needs a brighter key light on his face. Like I think that's one of the problems. That's just it's not that the piece is like you just can't see him right there.
Mm.
You know.
But with that, are you thinking that's coming from his gun rather than the laser underneath him?
Hey, how about it's just because we can see his face? Fuck it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, don't overthink
Yeah.
it. Here's the rule, folks. If you know the rules and you intentionally break them because at the end of the day it looks better a certain way, go that way. Like, at the end of the day, dude, if you do the wrong thing, or when I say wrong thing, if you make up a bunch of lighting source and a bunch of glows because you're just doing it because you think it looks cool, it doesn't matter, you're going to end up in a bad position in life. But for the piece, if you just create some imaginary light source that then, improves the visual, so the readability of the art, that's going to sell the art.
Yeah.
Try to think about from a marketing standpoint. Like, who cares if it's a realistic lighting source? No one, I mean, if some guy goes, Rob, actually, right here, the fucking thing would be super dark and they would fall. I'm like, yeah, but then you couldn't see in the fucking whatever. Don't buy it. Like, it's okay to not be the best. And when you're not the best, people will start, when you get that in your head, right? And you're focused on just making your art readable and fun, I think it just frees you. You're going to get better as a lighting person. You're going to get better as a painter, as a colorist, an illustrator. But you will then start to get to, I think, the heart of your art, the core
Mm.
of what you're trying to do. And when I think people look at this, they're not seeing, oh, Rob could have done all these other things. They're just going, oh, well, fuck, look at all that shit. Oh, that's cool. Oh, no, no, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that I think my art's fucking badass. I'm just saying that once I let that go, and then I allowed myself a bunch of other pieces to focus on, like, 'cause I mean, this right here is incredibly simply colored, dude. Like, I'm like, fuck, I can't believe I did that with like how many real? I mean, it's got some layers, but the lighting, it's one shade layer, dude. One
Yeah.
one shade layer, and then some airbrush lighting. So this can be done in the exact same manner. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that he's green and he's orange and she's purple and he's blue. None of that shit is important. Um, if we come to the layer effects, I mean, why don't we just fucking go right to glows because that'll be fun. So, uh, sharp.
Yeah. I did have a version where I had loads of that sort of stuff on it, and I spent a whole evening put it all on, and then the next morning I looked at it and thought, that's too much, and then took it off.
Yeah, the trick is to not rely on it. You're just using it to add a little snaz, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we can come here and just connect. You actually don't overlight that shit. Just make it on the lasers. So, see how here you got the rim lights going all the way around? Like,
Mm.
you could, well, if you do this, you could still get a secondary. Doesn't have to be super crazy. But you're not doing it all over his, like, you're not coming here and going around all in his face, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
make certain that when you do these sorts of, like, little lighting things, you're not adding it to the whole fucking piece, around every little character. You're just trying to,
Yeah. Use it to help split it up a little bit more and add a bit of sort of depth to it.
And then people go, "Oh, I like the glow," and you're like, "Fucking glow, man!" Like, yeah, I'm just you get artists. We like to always feel persecuted, so you could be, "Alright, fuck, all you like is the glows. You don't even like my fucking art." Like, "Hey, glows." It's funny. It's like if you hired a great colorist and you spent 30 hours drawing it and they spent 6 hours coloring it. People go, "Man, who's your colorist?" You're like, "Fuck, you know how long it took to draw that?" Like, now, when you're looking at glow layers from far away, it's a little unfair because they render weird. So you have to sort of make a quick flatten, so it's not trying to render those pixels way far out.
Mm.
And if we come here and add one more, let's add something. So I'm seeing now maybe this can be tied in using cream yellow and cream green. Like, once you get it, you try to draw, but you had the selection, the zoom tool on. That's always fun. So I can come here.
Yeah, again, working with a tighter palette helps a lot because when I was doing it, I was like, well, this laser's pink, so these highlights are going to be pink, and this laser's green, so these
Attack of
highlights
the
are.
Clones, Doug. You ever watch the
Yeah,
opening of
yeah,
Revenge of the Sith and they got all those lime greens, like when they're attacking they're trying to save the Chancellor, and there's like lime greens in the control room, and there's fucking pinks and purples, and there's all this shit going on everywhere. And I'm like, just think back to, always remember, think about Bespin, right? Like how much was accomplished in that Cloud City fight with two color schemes, right? With blue in the
yeah.
back and orange in the front. And let's just say everything should be that, but like you have every color at your disposal doesn't mean. Now, do you paint like traditionally? Do you do any kind of like marker renderings or color pencil?
Yeah, I've do some sketchbook work. I have pro markers and
I would
yeah,
probably recommend when you get the lines done to do a color comp physically.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Comics used to be colored that way actually. Uh, Before, even in the dawn of the computer age, uh, like I can show you some examples. Back up my pictures artist. Let's go to Joe Chiodo, one of the great colorists from Wildstorm Studios. Chiodo Joe. So this Joe would go through, print out the lines, and physically color the actual comic, and then that would be handed off to what they called separators and the computer people, and they would go and do that in Photoshop. So like
Ooh.
that's physically
What
colored.
would they do with markers or with
Yeah,
like
he'd use just markers, sometimes acrylic paint if they need something more opaque, just to
yeah.
touch it up. So like if we go, that's not one. Let's find some more of his stuff. These are one of his oil paintings. Let me find some actual. I used to see these all the time when I go to con as a kid. So if we look at his Gen 13 Batman, you can see just that basic lighting scheme right now.
Mm.
This is over a photostat, so they would actually just take the pencils, or this is the rough pencils, and photocopy it. And you can see this is marker with a little bit of probably some acrylic here and there. But you can actually start to control, start to work with, how do I say this? You can force yourself to learn to work with limited palettes when you use traditional media because there's nowhere else to go. Like, see this
Yeah,
piece? There's a reason why, like, well, yeah, could he go in there and render each character out? Right, but you wouldn't see this chick. And I think now, this is why I hate it when they take older comics and recolor them because they would make sure every character is airbrushed and you'd see them all, they'd all be tinted probably brown. And,
yeah,
like, that is, one, I don't think that's what you're going for. But two, it's just a starting point. And this being able to work these tonal oranges, and then when you go in and you actually color, you can follow this guide and then actually give a real lighting glows and maybe little accent glows here, you know, on the final digital piece. But it would certainly help because that's why I started coloring with markers again. And, Like one informs the other for me.
Yeah.
Especially with the watercolors, because you just fucking cannot add 100 more colors you add, the more mud you get, right?
Yeah.
There's no
Just
way
helps you
around
get a
it.
bit more control over it, doesn't it? And then you can apply that to digitally.
Yeah, so if I come here, like I think too, some of these lighting things that you're doing, they're all super thin. Like, see here? Like this is like
Yeah.
a super line, little thin line, but like up close, it's not so bad, you know, to make it more than just little rim lights. So I can grab. I mean, that's a big blob of paint, but
Yeah, I get
you,
it.
you
Take the
s-
meaning.
yeah. So, and you don't have to go like I think you're trying to end up somewhere where it's like slightly better than cell shading, right? Like one step above. I don't think you're trying to do like crazy digital, paints where everything's perfectly blended and you got all these,
No, no, no.
right? So you don't have to go and then go, well, since that's green, I'll come in here with my painting brush and I have to go in here and, you know, perfectly smooth and blend all this shit out. Like it doesn't have to be that way. Uh, but I do think like, if I came here and just went, all right,
One of the things I did, I think, that makes it a bit darker than it should, is I did it like an occlusion pass and just did all the occlusion shadows.
mm,
Um, I think that darkened it down a bit too much.
yeah, those 3D dudes. I've
Yeah,
been I've been practicing with those gradient mats for a while, like, and sometimes I'll do a whole piece in them. And the one thing I've sort of arrived at is if you're gonna use them, what you kind of really need to start off with is you need it to be your base to be more at a 50% gray with
right.
pushes into black, right? Because instead of these strong whites next to blacks,
Mm,
it needs to be more um, neutral around the core parts with then. So like if I come here, let me create a new layer just to give you an example. So if I have a white background, okay, thank you for that, appreciate it. And then I'll come and add more of a neutral. So let's say you got a character, all right, Bob, or let's make it a Betty because fuck it, right? That'd be fun. So, and she's like, oh yeah, we got curves and we got a little leg, yay. And over here. So, how do I say this? Like, if you end up with a spotlight effect, like if I come in and, okay, helps with the airbrush, and I start to do this, that's very contrasty, but it's kind of overkill. Like, you're going to end up with a gradient map, black represents one color, white represents another, and then it blends the two between. That's kind of the benefit to a gradient map, but you don't
yeah,
actually have to sit there with seven colors of green getting yourself into blue and mix them all together. You let
yeah.
Photoshop do that. Problem is, like if I throw a gradient map over this right now, like gradient map, let's pick something a little more two-tone. That's too. Let's see if I was going. Uh, so if I turn that down a bit more, it's easier to start to blend. Does that make sense? Like if I turn the contrast all the way up, see how that glows
Yeah.
in your face, you know? So gradient maps work better when your base is more like a neutral, and then you come in at the very like crevices of areas, pinch points, and add in like core
Yeah.
shadow. See how that pops it right out? Makes it
Yeah.
more three-dimensional. Like I'm trying to find ways to describe this. I haven't made a video yet because I'm like, how the fuck do I describe this? You know?
It's sort of you start off more neutral, so you've got more wiggle room at the end to go darker or lighter in the little places if you need to.
You just want to do it around areas of pressure, the dark
Mm,
areas, right? You want to think about, you know, you don't want to go around the whole piece and start to airbrush black around the whole, every boob, every muscle, every glove. It's around, like, right where the chin would hit the neck, down there, would be a nice little core piece because it'll pop that out off the neck. I don't need anything right there. Maybe if she had like where her knee was. I mean, maybe, you know, doesn't really seem like it. Maybe down by the here where the back of the knee would be probably more like a better idea because there'd be like a little fold in the skin,
yeah.
you know. And so when you start to add that, you get
Yeah, it just brings it forward a little bit more. Sort of separates the two.
yeah, and then you have room too. Like if you need to, you have room. You still have room to come over here and go. All right, here's some actual light. You know, like you can actually create lighting with it. You're not just haloing all your art. I don't know if haloing is the right word. Rim lining the shit out of everything because that's how you do it. Does that make any sense? I don't know if I'm explaining myself
Yeah.
right. Like you almost feel like you're just like you're trying to actually when you pull back you can still see the shapes. You're not seeing this giant contrast. Like if I just turn this all back up. Like that's just a mess of shit. You know? Like that's just a lot of pink lines and a lot of yellow lighting. It doesn't mean anything. But if I pull back I can start to see the form. So getting back to like your piece, like you see how like they all have black here and it doesn't actually help see them in any way, shape, or form. Like it doesn't actually.
Mm,
So if I came here, took all, you know what? Fuck it. More of a screen. Turn it down. Just these are very subtle shifts. They're not like. And we could probably even just set it so it goes into the crevices. Well, lighten. What is it, darken? Is that what? Okay, lighter, lighter. See, it's a little difficult to turn it off here and see it in color because it's adding a glow to that. That's not necessary. It,
yeah, you're just trying to lighten up the base of it rather than
right. It's more at your core center. So what I would do is everywhere you have the shade, if this, as all of this is in one shade, like her hair, I would take these characters, select your flats. Whatever the shade is in your mask, if that was masked in, I would, if that's black right there, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
for the
if,
shadow of her hair.
yeah, so if the shadow of her hair, like all the shadows for this dude, for the boy and her, if those shadows are just white and black in the mask, I
Mm,
would select her and him and make their shadows in the mask instead of black. I'd make it 50%.
Oh, okay.
So the shading, the level of value on that shading comes down. Like I'm trying to fix it here, through like a lighting effect. It's actually not the way you want to do it. You can go into your lighting and just turn that down in the shade. And so that's what I would do with like even the characters like on the Battletoads, the characters in the front, I might be coloring, I might start with a 100% black, but I might actually select once I've locked them in, I'll take their selections and make that area in the mask 50% black instead of 100% or 70% black instead of 100%, you know? So, or white, sorry, white because it's positive. But you know what I'm talking about? Like you're not painting 100% black to get a core shadow and then trying to take that opacity of the layer and turn it up and down. Just turn her shadows lighter.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
the
still have
simplest.
room. So once you do that, what you'll be able to do is you can then say, okay, maybe it's a little hard to read, but then you could just come around in here so that her shadows are a cell shade. Then you come around and just with a little bit of airbrush, you can pop things out. Does that make sense? Like you
Yeah.
can around the little bit of like, if you wanted to add a little bit more form, you can come and just very carefully, subtly pop things forward. Or just add an animation. They do this like if you look at the Disney movies from the '90s, they'll have one shade layer on the characters, and then usually like a gradient shade. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
that's
There's like
based
a
on
sort of secondary light bounce sort of shade.
it's just yeah, I call it gradient shade. Just it says basically it's based on the world, you know. And
Mm.
so with my stuff now, I try to adhere to that same basic idea that this has one cell shade and then gradient shade, right? Based on the world lighting. And then on some of these other pieces, like on his armor, I'll go in there and airbrush a little extra to pop that armor out
Mm.
with the airbrush. And I don't do it on everything. Like I'm not these fucking nunchucks. Oh, so what? Like I could go in there and airbrush behind them, but it doesn't fucking matter. Like like it just doesn't. I'm killing myself.
Yeah.
Like it's irrelevant. But if you look at when I did like these controllers, the shade here is actually like a 50%, and then that's 100% shade. You know, and then that's like no shade. That's pure white because it's closer to this core little thing. You know, so that's done right in the shade layer. So that's why I color in masks because if you want to tone down some of the value of the shade in the mask, you don't change. You're not changing. You're not drawing new shades in. You just select the character, trap that area, and instead of that being black and white, that's 50% black and next to white. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to talk about masks, sometimes. Like, people get a little, I don't get masks, man. Like,
I never really used them before I started doing this. It's a bit of a revelation. It's nice to. When I first started trying to use them, I was using just a gradient layer. I was like, why aren't they bloody working the way his are? I
it's a
never
bit,
realised wasn't using a gradient map.
so
It was just a normal gradient.
the brilliant of a mask for people to know is if let's say I wanted to create a new shade layer using, fuck it, I like to use like a purple, right? So we'll just take a layer and I want to make this, like a multiply, whatever, a hard light. Let's do a hard light. Um, I want to paint this in as a shade layer. I can then create a mask right there using the mask button. Now it's going to show white means yes, black means no. Means white means I want to see it, black means I don't want to see it. So if I invert that right there, I'm in the mask, everything's black. Now while I'm in the mask, I can quickly, using only black and white, so on my keyboard I'm just tapping the X key, okay, to flip between the two buttons, the two foreground and background color. I can paint in the mask and then go, oh, I don't want that. And it's non-destructive. Means non-destructive means I'm not erasing here. I'm just painting it and whether something's visible or not. Makes a big difference in terms of working because I'm just like do 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 one button do 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 do. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I'll just get rid of that. So Let's add like an overlay. Um, so when I'm doing my shades, I'll do them all in the mask, one shade layer. And then if you wanted to, you can always come around once you're done. Like you can come around with like a painted brush, and then just if you wanted to have that little painted look, you can go around the edge when you're done and be like,
Mm.
"There's all my little. Oh, look at that, it's painted. Ha ha ha. Looks painted." Oh, if you're like, "Oh, I want to add a chalk brush," oh, I can just chalk the edge, and it looks like it's chalked up. I didn't actually
So,
sit there all day with the fucking chalk brush trying to make, oh, come on. Oh, fuck. Oh, I didn't fill in that little thing. You know, it's all, masks are brilliant.
oh yeah,
And then, so,
because
like, go ahead.
that's what I did the initial key light with. I just put it all in shadow and then just erased the highlights, for where the lights would be coming from.
Right. So let's say that right there is her shade. So I'm saying right now it's 100% white, right? In the
Hmm.
mask. So we'll come here and set it more like to that. And then you have to select this, right click intersect mask so you're getting just her, and turn that intensity down.
Yeah.
Oh my god, mind blown, right? Like you didn't
I
think to
don't know why I
add.
never used, I
hmm
never really thought to use any greys in it. I just was just sticking with white and black.
Son of a bitch. So
Uh,
when you set your initial multiply, you don't have to fill it with black. You can fill it 70% black, 60. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
you can, and then have a base to pop it out if you want. I mean, there's so many ways to work in Photoshop. That's why people go, I just want the one thing so I don't have to think about it. You need to be able to think creatively, folks. Like I'm not saying you aren't, but sometimes people, you new artists out there are just like, I don't want to think about the program. I just want the program to go. There's a glow button to click the glow. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not doing all the work for you. Like
So I like to sort of think about it as I you find lots of different techniques to do different things, and then you can cherry pick them depending on what the image you're making needs. It's sort of the way I try to think about it.
that's a good idea. That's a good explanation of how that works. You try a little bit of everything, or like in Big Trouble in Little China, it's like Chinese buffet. You take what you want and you leave the rest. Like all things come back to Big Trouble in Little China for me. So, um, but you got to be careful when you start doing multiple glows upon things, because
Yeah,
you end up with just like a ton of glows. So I don't know if that's exactly
yeah.
what
Too
I would do
too
there.
many of those I thought could be a bit distracting.
And so the only way around that is if you really wanted to light it, you have to manually go in with the motherfucking airbrush, manually do this thing we call painting. I don't know if you folks have heard of this. And then, and then, oh, okay, I overlay, which will create like a saturation.
Mm.
Yeah, if I really wanted to do that, you could do it. But personally speaking, you know, like I would probably try to get this into like this purple to orange thing, and a
Yeah,
little bit of green just because it blends, and then that green should be right where he's at, so he's green,
yeah,
and try to find a way like the trying to find the way part is where you're like, so
yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of the green. Like I know that's his green, I just hate that green. So like like this is just my complex, folks. Like I would pick something more.
It's close to the turquoisey sort of.
Yeah, just because lime green, I fucking hate it, bro. Like, there's a movie Disney made. It's beautiful to look at. It's called Treasure Planet. Have you seen this?
Years ago, yeah.
Okay, so they did a really brilliant job of this film visually, except, let me show you. And I always try to watch out for this. Let's try going to Treasure Planet. Look how, like, oh, look at these great spaces. See, it's got browns and look at all these blues and gold. It's amazing. And
Right.
then this happens. They shove this character, this guy, this fucking annoying ass robot, shows up with his lime fucking green scheme and they do this. There's nothing natural about that. Is the color we use when we make our flats, so we know we fucked up. Like we know that flat. Like you don't want that lime green, man. Like I always
Yeah,
try to
it's
pull it more into
jarring, isn't it?
like these teals are nice, like here, but that one in the center, that's oof, man. Like that, but that is fucking horrendous.
Disney like that green, though, don't they? Whenever they got an evil character, they always put those greens
This stupid shit right here. It's the worst, man. It's
in
not.
Scar in The Lion King when he does his song is just that green.
Yeah, and I always try to think back like I go more in the teals. Like if we look at the Hildebrandt brothers, they always had a really good animated kind of like painting feel.
Right.
And if you look at like even when they were doing dragons, it's more in these teals, right?
Yeah.
And then if they use green, they'll use like olive greens. Even on characters like Rogue, it's not that super lime. It's got warmness in there, but it's not fucking, destructive lime. Like even this right here has a core yellow.
Yeah.
But that Treasure Planet green has no core whatsoever. It's just neon fucking green, man. And so I always think about that. Like, is that really the way I want to go? A really quick way you can fix it, again, is just with a gradient map. You can set it to color, duplicate it, turn it down to, let's go to lighten. G. Look, this is not the ideal way to work where you're reverse engineering your piece. By the way, folks. See, that's just less. It's less harsh. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
it's softer.
Yeah. It'd be plushy, like Rainbow Bright, if people know what the fuck that is. When I was a kid, I was attracted to the colors of like the Rainbow Bright characters. I'm like, oh, my mom thought it. She's like, hey, he's a little guy. I'm like, no, man, it's like color. Like I was like the sprites and shit. And all my friends. Yeah, you see that?
Mm.
Oh god, bugging the fuck out of me. You know.
Yeah, it works a lot better for in the shadows, and you don't get those muddy sort of pea greens as it transitions.
Yeah, and the lighting too ends up a little bit more subdued. So, but that
Yeah,
again, you don't want to be reverse engineering the whole piece. You can take that, sample it, and that can become your coloring flat. So there's a difference between
yeah,
sectional flats and color. You can come here and go, okay, that will be my base color, or whatever.
yeah. I'd probably just go back to the base color and change that.
Yeah, and then his blacks here. So if these guys are like 50% visibility on the blacks, his shadows, the duck, and the ones around Bucky can be slightly more, right? Intensity, and then Bucky, you can use the intensity or the value of the shadows so that they end up lighter in the shadow value base, a little lighter next to him, and lighter still further out. So he
Yeah,
then ends up popping forward. Does that make sense?
yeah, because their shadows would be more intense because they're closer to the light source, so
And
it sort of
yeah, and these guys
pulls.
are super dark, right?
Yeah,
Like, and that's fine because you're not trying to look at them. They're just generic fucking toad dudes.
mm.
So, and then you'll see Bucky. Like, I think that'll happen pretty easily. And if we just go over really quickly to here, we can kind of see where we started out with. And then where we're ending up, right?
Yeah. I see the direction. That looks a lot more sort of readable.
And see how they're not blue now? Whew.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wasn't
you're gonna
happy
regret
with
that
that.
decision.
Yeah,
Look, and I just want to show people this is all self-taught. So even though I was like worked in the art department, I didn't receive a lot of help with this. It was like the art director looked at me and go, I don't know, man, you're not gonna make it. So I'd be like, oh shit, let me see if I can't dig up. Give me a second for this. It's on the Joe Chiodo. Okay, let me go back to my old backup. Let's go look at some old Rob art. New freelance
Rob back in
schedule.
the day.
Yeah, I can show you where I totally. Oh no, it's on my E backup. So yeah, here we go. Sketch Rob and Wizard World 26. Is that it? Con promo. I think it might be the 2006.
Just before you were SketchCraft.
Sketch Rob. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
very clever. It wants to take its sweet ass time. Yeah, this nightmare. This piece. And that isn't even the full art. Let's see if I can get the full art. Because this thing was a bad idea. So let me. I may have deleted it. The full piece. I don't think I would because it was so bad. I was like, I can never forget what I just did here. Because it was. Yeah, well. This piece, this background art,
Mm.
this whirlwind of nonsense extended all the way out. And it was all like rainbow lime colored and glows. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. First off, the art, like I tried to make a yin yang out of this thing, and it's dumb. It was like, it's just bad. But beyond that, the coloring is fucking all over the place. So this is 2006, and in 10 years, you know, I go from that to this,
Yeah.
you know,
Big jump.
very, very gradually and very methodically. And I can tell you, it's not going to take 10 years to make that leap, but a few things you got to do is really nail down a simple one shade layer, with base lighting, and then you got
Yeah.
some two or three small like a gradient level, and then some small gradient pushbacks, so you can separate armor. Because you want her armor, you don't want it to all feel flat. You want to separate a few pieces, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be able to still have that available to you, and then finding out things like greens, like when you end up in a situation where that ends up like it doesn't even look green. At some point you're like, I see the green there, but it's just yellow. It doesn't have to be so toned into the color, and you're trying to like merge and yellows and blues and purples, and you know,
Yeah. I took some of the colors from the actual comic and found they just don't really work together for this
no,
piece.
no. Try to think about the colors from the comic if the Hildebrands, just to start. I'm not saying that you gotta do that the rest of your life. I'm saying just to start.
Yeah.
Because they had a way of coloring that was cartoony, but you know what I mean, wasn't cartoony. Like, when they like to do those big bada boom fonts,
Yeah,
and
they sort of towed the line between sort of realism but cartoony at the same time.
they did it with traditional paints. So it's not like those color schemes are impossible to recreate or get
Yeah.
down in comics. So if you just start there in a year or two, pretty easily you're going to see a giant leap in improvement.
Yeah.
But again, this is a hard piece of practice. I was telling you, yeah, just Bucky alone would have been a fucking
Yeah.
enough effort, guy. It's good to
There's
tackle the beast.
only going to be one character for the next one.
Yeah, that's a smart move. So from there to here, and then what I'm going to do, Dominic, is I will transfer you this file.
Ah,
So
cheers.
you'll have the gradient maps already in there, and you can actually start to color sample, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, like
So one of the things I've learned from this is that the roughy has to be. I thought I had everything mapped out in the roughy. I thought I sort of knew where I was going, but getting much further on, I realised, yeah, needed to get things nailed down in the roughy a lot more.
And and I think too, like if I go to my Ruffy for the Battletoads, that would be a fair comparison to make. That lighting as it stands,
Yeah,
I mean it's very
yeah, it's all there.
all I did was increase, okay, I want those greens to be a certain way with the yellow. I made certain that this stuff down here wasn't so dark you couldn't see the gamepad,
Mm.
you know?
But all the information's there. Whereas if you look at my roughy to what I've got at the minute, like they're quite different.
That's why sometimes when people are like, man, you spent like 6 hours on that Ruffy. I'm like, yeah, so when I get to this state, I'm not trying to figure out the fucking piece. That is the
Mm.
worst. Don't you, when you got this many elements on the board, it's for some reason, it's not the same as when you have a bunch of scribbles. You know what I mean? When they're this well drawn and they got armor and fingers and eyebrows and hair, it's like you're trying to manage so much at once. And when it's all super loose, even though it has the same amount of elements, essentially, when it's super loose, it's easier to deal with in a
Yeah.
way, you know? Like, I don't know why that is exactly. What up here, you know?
When it's that loose, the brain sort of fills in bits of it, and
Yeah. And by the way, keep that in mind while you're working that the brain will fill in bits. Don't overdo it. I mean, like, if this were to be a cover for a book, right? I mean, obviously you wouldn't need the top characters, but let's say you drew them in anyway. You know,
yeah, cover them.
it'd be like Bucky O'Hare.
Mm.
If he has that kind of green with, some basic, you can see, oh, that would work really good. Like, so you're not, dude, this is like, I really think if you just continue down this path, a few edits, you're going to be good on this piece. Like it's not like, oh, you fuck, game over, man, game over, put her in charge, like it's not, dude. It's just how can you arrive at this in the
Mm.
Ruffy stage? And that's one of the reasons 3 years ago I started doing those landscape paintings, and I was like, I got 45 minutes, you know, to figure out these landscapes. It wasn't because I wanted to be a landscape artist, it's because I was like, I don't understand world painting and world lighting. I don't, I'm a character and I can fake it. But on the 3DS cover, that isn't the world tight in those characters. That's just me taking the characters and a little bit of yellow and then I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, don't care, man. Moving on. Not enough emotion, but I mean, you can easily. This is not hard, dude. I mean, at some point, as a friend, I'll be like, let it go, Dominic. It looks like if you got it to this point and you just cleaned it up, you
Yeah.
know, it's good. It's good. Don't spend another month. It's sometimes with Brandon, I'm like, you're done. It's done.
Yeah. And I
But
want this to be done so I can move on.
I think if you just go down this path right here, clean it up, fix the greens, just get over here, just make sure these are all actually, they're not, it's not this blob of shit, but, just clean it up,
Yeah.
get this all done. You have a fucking winner. You can go to a con with that, and you're already beating half of the art that's in Artist Alley with this alone, you know?
Oh, well.
So believe me, because fucking hell, they never learn basic lighting and colors, dude. And then take what you've learned and apply it to the next solo character piece,
Yeah.
so you don't kill yourself. You have any other questions? If I missed something or there's something you've
No,
been?
you've been pretty thorough so far. Yeah.
Well, we spent a long time, man. I'm sorry to eat up an hour and a half of
No,
your time.
oh, it's been a big help. So
And everyone else, if you have any questions out there, and all you crafties, leave your comments below. I will answer. You can get a hold of me, Rob at SketchCraft. It's pretty easy to find me. All the info's below. Dominic, is there anywhere you hang out you'd like people to come see your art? You have an Instagram or a Twitter or anything?
Uh, I've got an Instagram, but it's not really an official one. It's just sort of my life.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's got pictures. It's got the artwork I do, but it's also got other crap on there.
Well, when
Um,
you got a full portfolio, man, we got to have you back on. Go through some of your stuff. Talk about
yeah,
what you
yeah, I
do for a
can
living.
do that. I'm in sort of in the middle of making a website at the minute. I had one of these Wix ones, but I didn't like it, so I'm making an HTML one at the minute. So it's sort of in progress. But yeah, we can definitely send you a load of my work, and you can have a look at it.
Wix. There used to be this program in the early 90s called Kix that was like this painting program that was all based around stamps. It was
All
horrible.
right.
I was like, this isn't Photoshop. Oh, it's for coloring your art. You don't color shit with this. It's stamps. So here at Wix, I'm like, it's Kix. So, all right, everybody. I'm going to head out of here. Say goodbye.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Do-do. Bucky O'Hare going to sleep.